We are live.
Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of Dungeon Delvers. As always, he's Gene,
He's Rennie.
and together we
We
are
are
Unconventional
unconventional
Heroes.
heroes.
And one day we'll get that
Never. I
right.
refuse. I always wonder if you're gonna say
You know
dungeon
what?
delvers or unconventional heroes. I'm never
It's
quite
always
sure.
been Unconventional Heroes. It's
Yeah,
always been.
but it could change at any moment. I don't know.
Gene's like, life is chaos. You don't know what's going to happen.
Maybe I just don't have enough
Uh,
faith.
well, maybe we can fix that this episode as we delve into the dungeon of Living on a Prayer or Clerics in 5th edition. What's their deal? Um so as always, guys and gals and everyone in between, this show is just chock full of opinions. We are not experts, nor doctors, nor scientists. We are just two guys with a bevy of opinions about D&D. Some good, some bad, and just take that into deep consideration as you join us in delving through this dungeon. Um, we will also attempt to answer questions as they arise from the audience. I have to say, last episode there were some very excellent questions, so thank you
Two
everyone who asked a question,
super
except for
great
Mark.
questions. And Mark's the worst.
Um, Mark's the worst. But the audience questions are getting better, and guys, we love them. We love that stuff. And I guess before we begin, I just have a little piece that I want to say, and that's just you know we started this whole thing with a little bit of elbow grease and a bit of a prayer and a hope. See how I'm doing that, Gene? That's full
Nice.
circle. Yeah, but a little bit of a prayer and a hope, and we just wanted to have some fun on the internet. And you guys joined us, and it's been pretty amazing that we became affiliates on Twitch, and that you're still here, and that's great, and that gives us the opportunity to keep doing this week after week. And yell at each other about D&D on the internet, as opposed to just yelling at each other about D&D in our own time.
Yeah, now it's your time.
Yeah, it's Gene. It's our
It's
time.
our time together. We're doing this together.
All right. So I think that's enough for that. Gene, I think you know what time it is.
Time for me to lose at rolling initiative.
Let's do this.
My
You want to
god
start it?
is the
Go ahead.
god of low rolls. I got
Would you
13.
13? All right, above average, above average.
13. 13.
13. For anyone who doesn't get that reference, we suggest watching HBO's Rome, an excellent show. And
13.
I got, yep, all right.
Woo!
How the tables have turned.
It's because I've had faith in my dice gods.
Ooh,
All right.
that's that's true. You prayed beforehand.
I
Yeah.
did. I prayed to the dice gods and they have answered me. Well, no, it's because my god is the god of low rolls, so my prayer clearly was transferred to you as a curse.
Your God's a dick.
Listen, whatever. It's cool. So, why be a cleric? So as we enter this dungeon, I changed the transition of the page. So, why be a cleric? Now, there's not super amount of like crazy inspirations that we can give you, but we can give you some opinions of examples that we think really fit the build. So from movies, television, books, comics, I mean, we can always take, our space wizards that are the Jedi, but they are kind of a monastic holy order who believe in this great force that is bigger and greater than themselves, and they put their faith completely in that. And they have some weird, wacky powers that could be construed as, divine magic. They might be a good example of a cleric. Obviously, the show and also the comic Preacher got a whole lot of weird divine powers, and there's a whole lot of weird supernatural that could easily fall into that. Looking at like movies like The Exorcist or any of
The
those,
power of Christ compels
compels,
you.
yeah, turning demons, some supernatural stuff from the show Supernatural. They can be using clerical, anytime, the one preacher or the ex priest, pulls out his holy symbol to turn and cast away vampires in any vampire movie or book. That could be, a form of their, like, turning the undead. I argued with Rennie for a while that I think Gandalf is more of a light cleric than a wizard any day, because I don't see him doing a lot of wizard shit, but besides being philosophical.
It's the hat, Gene. That's where your argument falls apart. It's the hat.
Yeah, maybe he's just a dirty cleric. he's just a hobo cleric. Rennie, then we talked about Avatar. If you look at like the Water Tribe, they do a lot of like healing magic and like with their water bending. Katara would be probably a great example of a cleric. I mean, if you look at, the biblical, yeah, I said that, like
That
saints,
is a
you
million
know,
percent not a word.
it's a word I just made up, like saints and miracles, those would obviously be more modern examples uh, of clerics. I mean, Thor is a great example if you look at him in the, both the comics and also the movies. He's this like godlike being with divine powers. Controlling storms and lightning is a path you can take. Um, Also, if you look at many demigods, some of their abilities, some of the Greek pantheon, like some of those descendants could seem to have that same divine base that you are looking for in your cleric character.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And there there's also, as much as D&D likes its archetypes, there's a lot of like you could say a Jedi is maybe a Psy warrior fighter, but they could also be a cleric. A lot of the stuff is interpretation. Um, One thing that I have always found is really fun for being a cleric is you get this faith-based role play. You know, to quote the Blues Brothers, you are constantly on a mission from God,
And
uh, from Gad. And and listen, I'll be honest. I'm not a super faithful person. I don't attend church or temple. I haven't in a long time. But the concept of a person who's so adherent to faith, now it helps in D&D and many of the D&D settings that, you know, gods are like really real. They're not just, well, I believe they're real, so they're real. Like, no, no, that guy showed up one time and he knocked over a house. Like,
I mean, they also give you magic powers, which is
right,
another way
right.
to show your faith
Yeah, yeah.
exists.
Thoughts and prayers aren't just vibes. Thoughts and prayers are spirit guardians. Like, um, so and that faith-based RP is definitely a choice that you make, because it's going to be very close to how you portray yourself, whether you are a devout zealot or maybe you have this crisis of faith and you are exploring the doubt of faith, or but faith is going to factor in, and how you play with that paradigm is a lot of fun. Or if you're playing a cleric, that's a paradigm at least you're probably interested in. And plus you get this kind of built-in RP connection to the world around you, with the various temples and churches to the various gods of the world. Being a cleric, even if you don't follow the same god as another cleric, you guys understand each other on an intrinsic level. Like, yeah, we are both devoted to a cause. And while you may practice differently, there are enough similarities there. Um, that it gives you any town or civilization you go to, or heck, even shrines in the woods or stuff like that, you have a kind of understanding there. And plus it gives you access to part of the sort of D&D world of the cosmology. the upper planes, the lower planes, limbo, all those all those places in between. Clerics really deal with that. When someone goes, hey, where does my soul go? You might have a map. Like, you very much are like, well, were you bad? What kind of bad were you? You might go to this level of hell. Or, oh, you were good and you followed this god? Well, in Elysium, well, his domain, and it may not be that specific, but you as a character kind of get access through magic and role play and certain skills that you literally have an understanding of the spiritual world outside the world you reside in, which again is cool, if that is an area that interests you, and if you're interested in playing a cleric, you're probably down on that.
You also get to use fancy words like supernal.
Mm.
Also, do you want to have the power over life and death? That's no, literally, that's what you do, because you're the healer of the party most of the time. Doesn't have to be always. There are many other classes, races, and different combos that can heal, but it is traditionally a cleric.
Oh yeah.
But there are death clerics who might argue that, and there are some trickster clerics that definitely argue that. There are plenty of different domains that, while every cleric can heal, some can do it better than others, and also some can hurt better than others. So, you are the master of life and death. You are one of the very few classes that can bring people back from death. And also, you're an incredible support class. A lot of their spells are based on improving their party, improving skills, improving their party's combat effectiveness, controlling the battlefield. They get a lot of different support for their party and themselves, that it's hard to not want to have a.
Yeah. You might often find, when you're making a new group, like, oh, is anyone playing a cleric? Like that question might come up. Um, and there's a reason for it. Clerics can kind of do stuff that not a lot of other classes can accomplish. Um, and to that end, when it comes to that support side of game, because some people love that tanking, some people love plowing damage downfield, but some people, myself included, love that support aspect of D&D. Healing your buddies, giving them buffs so they can have an awesome hero moment. Like, it's really cool. And the cleric buffs that exist, again, there are bar none. So the cleric gets some of the best buff spells in the game, as well as some of the best like hindering effects of the game, in the form of blinding people, deafening people, giving them diseases or curses as your want may arise. Uh, so clerics have this kind of unique spot in the D&D archetypes, that they can both be the best boon to their allies, but the worst, bane of their enemies. Bane, because that's a spell they can cast.
Nice.
Gene, you want to talk a little bit about how undead and clerics and how
Yeah,
well they mix?
I'll talk about destroying that undead horse right now. So, uh, clerics, they get a very unique ability to themselves, that they're the only class that gets it. There is no other class besides like paladin who are like fight clerics, but they don't even get it to this extent, where they can do that traditional scene of like, back, foul beast, and then like undead hiss and shriek or melt away in dust or sunlight bursts out of them. They can turn the undead. It changes the dynamic of certain encounters. But besides that, they also have a unique ability to destroy undead of low enough power. Dope as shit. And besides turning, they have these channel divinities, which are really great tools in their basket, mixed with their variety of spells to have the right tools for the job. Whatever you need, your cleric might have it if you give him enough time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of that kind of cleric toolbox, one of the cool things about cleric is that they are prepared spellcasters as opposed to memorized spellcasters or known spellcasters. And having that variable spellcasting, is really cool because if you know you're going to be in a very underground setting in the mountain, maybe you take stone shape that day. Uh, or locate creature or find traps. And again, they might be spells you normally wouldn't take in your repertoire, but you're going into a thing that would dictate having it. Uh, if you hear that there's like a Medusa somewhere in this dungeon, you might take Greater Restoration. Um, uh, and the cool thing is that each day you get to build that toolbox differently. What I often find is that I kind of have my like, here's the spells I always take, and then I have some sort of secondary sub out spells
In
that I might
in the
change
terms
out.
of another geeky hobby, in Magic the Gathering, you have your main 60 card deck and you have your sideboard, if you will.
Yeah, that's it. Your sideboard, yeah. And the cool thing is much like clerics get access to unique spells that other classes don't. And yes, there's crossovers with depending on subclasses and stuff like that. But the cleric spell list is very much its own creature that can accomplish a wide variety of buffs, heals, all manner of things. And as a cleric, kind of building your toolbox day to day, it's pretty cool. The only times it's not cool is when you think you're going into one situation and then your DM pulls a pulls a tricky move on you, and you're like, "Man, I took a whole lot of social spells today. It's not going to help in this
Well,
sewer dungeon we're about to go
good thing you can upcast Cure Light Wounds.
in." Too true.
I mean, I think one of my favorite things about being a cleric and why be them is you're this holy tank. You're either you're either wearing a full tin can of plate eventually, half plate, or leather, studded leather, depending on what style of thing. But you kind of get to choose that variety. You're generally a high armor classed holy machine. And let's face it, clerics can throw down. A lot of
Oh yeah.
clerics' domains give them uh, extra, the ability to use most martial weapons. Some don't, a lot don't, but they also get to improve their strikes with their own holiness. And they also are kind of like a divine gish, but they are a full caster, so they don't sacrifice any of their casting power. It's just that you're generally not going to get your two attacks around as what a fighting class would get. But you got a decent hit points. Okay, D8's not bad. No one's going to be laughing at that. You have a high armor class, likely if you use a shield and heavy armor, and you got spells for days, and
Oh
they're
yeah.
all
Oh
special and
yeah.
unique. And depending on your domain, can also make it so you hurt people way better. Even doing physically basic one round, one attack around. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I definitely dig them. I'm playing a cleric right now in our Friday campaign. He is a beat your face cleric with an axe, but I definitely throw a ton of spells to support that around.
You definitely do. It's always funny to me, right? The like, where does the distinction lie between paladin and cleric? Like, a paladin is a holy crusader with a sword and shield for their god. A cleric is a holy emissary with a sword and shield for their god. Where's the line?
Clerics don't have to follow extra codes.
That's fair. Yeah, there's not an
They're
oath that they're
they're
beholden to.
business casual
Right.
opposed to always formal.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Um And I mean, as to why play a cleric, is they're a classic D&D archetype. You know, um, it's one of those when you're composing your party, and kind of like I said earlier, when you ask around, like, "Ooh, does anyone have healing? Does anyone druid? Does anyone do a cleric?" Like, they are a classic D&D archetype for a reason. Clerics have been in every edition of Dungeons and Dragons because they have a place in the world where, in a world of magic and fantasy, and where the gods are quite literally real, a cleric is always going to have a place in a spot in the roster. um and personally, I've played a ton of clerics over the years, and they're pretty much have been pretty great from edition to edition. uh and fifth edition is no exception, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that's covered why you might want to be a cleric.
And
Um,
let me preemptively answer a question for DJ Poser before you ask it. Clerics did have the second best THACO in second edition D&D. Just figured I'd throw it out there. It was fighters and clerics. Next.
uh, yeah. All right. Well, Gene, we are moving deeper into the dungeon of faith, and we're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a cleric in fifth edition. And I think it's time for initiative.
Would you like to roll first since you rolled a natural one?
Yeah. Yeah. I think loser can
Oh,
roll
mighty
first.
dice god, give him a terrible
Oh.
roll. Thank you.
Hey.
That's like
Hey,
middle
that's
of the
not
road.
cool.
I'm just cursing you. I'm not praying for myself.
What are you, some kind of
Oh.
warlock?
Yes, but
Yeah, that's what you
I'm
get. That's what you
sorry,
get.
curse. I have been smote.
All right. All right. So, kind of to start this thing off, it feels good, Gene. It feels like the world is back to normal
Balance.
again. Um, so first thing you want to kind of consider is kind of your domain. Obviously your god is an important choice. It definitely is. And when you're creating that character, that story of what god you follow is definitely probably the first choice you make before you make any other choices. Um, and when you choose that god, you know, in D&D, they kind of represent, and I think they make this important distinction between domains and gods, because you might find two clerics that follow the same god but have different domains, because many of the gods in D&D and goddesses, they have a sort of a wide variety, and maybe not an entirely wide variety, but they have a scope that they kind of cover. Take like Salune, right? She covers night and the stars, and a little bit of she's like
Lycanthropy.
the patron of lycanthropy. uh and you could certainly say, well, hey, I'm going to be a twilight cleric. That makes perfect sense, right? But I would say you could just as easily make a light cleric, and as opposed to maybe golden sunlight, it's starlight, it's moonlight. And there's nothing wrong with your interpretation. It's really just how you flavor that story, because your god choice and your domain choice are going to kind of guide your RP, whether you buck against that god's purview, or you fall squarely in it, or you find some place in between. Is kind of up to you. And your domain will also sort of determine the style of cleric you are. Are you a super healy cleric? Do you have all those heals and restorations and stuff like that? Are you a blasty cleric and you're just dropping call lightnings and thunder waves on your enemies? Um, and each domain has channel divinity associated with it, and certain domain spells. And listen, if you're interested in looking ahead, because those spells become sort of rote spells for you, and you get them prepared for free every day. So it is worth looking into the kind of spells and the way that you will affect the world around you. um So, choosing your god and choosing your domain are, in my opinion, very different things. And they're both important for every cleric out there.
Um, just to add on to that, also, not just gods, because not every D&D setting or fantasy setting has gods. There's religions as well. Like Eberron really emphasizes that the gods don't walk the earth, so people still get holy powers and can summon the divine, but they follow religions. But you can follow a religion separate ways. We can, look at a real life example of like Christianity. There's so many different versions of it. That, and that's okay. So it's just what your religion is, and whether that is because Thunder Jesus heads downstairs and throws lightning bolts around, and you believe in that because you saw him walk on his rope sandals across the ocean there. That's fine, but you can equally also just believe in a concept of faith,
Right.
concept of religion.
Yeah, like spirituality is, again, just like in real life, is a very fluid, kind of how does it make sense to you kind of idea. And D&D isn't any different. They give you definitely the parameters if you're interested in following those paths, but kind of like Gene said, if you want to be I'm a cleric of life. I just, there's a lot of suffering and death in the world. I am on the side of life. Like that is just as legitimate as following, Thunder Jesus. By the way, I might be converting to Thunder Jesus. You heard it here first, folks.
Sweet, dope, sounds great. Who doesn't love Thunder Jesus?
Right?
I feel like he's definitely Korean Jesus' brother. Super ripped.
He's
Dude,
jacked.
Korean Jesus has like an 8-pack going on. Anyway, back to this definitely very important subject. What does it mean to be a cleric? Let's talk about it. Heals, heals, heals. You are gonna be your party's best friend. Everyone loves you because you're healing them. It's a staple. You're not just a healer, but you are the best healer. May not be the best healer in bursts, because Rennie and I have talked about other healers being very exceptional, but you are consistently exceptional healer.
Yep.
You will outshine every healer over time. Just being who you are, especially if you focus on if you focus on being a healing cleric with the domain that's associated. Yeah, I mean, listen, your party's gonna love you. Heck, you're gonna love you. You have so many buffs that you can give to them, and you can give to yourself. I will say, playing a cleric, cleric is not really a selfish class. Like there are times that you will cast spells that might only affect you, but it is very rare. A lot of your spells are always augmented either area effects or helping a lot of people at once, or fixing a problem on a single person. So while you can use that for yourself, generally you're kind of you're like the midfielder. You're kind of seeing what problem needs to be fixed. You could score a point if you need to, but you can also support defense when needed.
Who the
Yeah.
fuck are you making sport references?
Soccer! Played it when I was a kid. Not just rolling
Man,
dice.
you really dug deep on that one, didn't you?
I was talking to Connor about soccer a lot recently.
Ah, it's on your head. There you go.
Reminded me of my Ute.
You.
Ute.
Um, Yeah, and I mean, I'll just quickly add to that before we move on. Is listen, those moments, those clutch heal moments when your fighter is tanking the Hydra and they're down to 12 hit points, and you drop a mass cure wounds and the party gets like 25 healing back. Let me tell you, you get to be a rock star. Like that is a rock star moment. Um, so
Here,
just like fighters get that big hit moment or whatever, there is rock star moments for clerics too.
let's take DJ Poser's very important question,
Oh,
which
good
is,
God.
should the player making a cleric let the party know ahead of time that they don't intend to be a healing cleric? It's the worst when you think you have a cleric to heal and no one has healing ability? So I'll answer that twofold. I think first, when you're designing a party and character, I think it's a little bit more important the story of your character. So, that's a story decision of why you don't heal as much, might be. But as a
Right.
cleric, you have that tool always in your set. And if you guys keep getting your asses kicked in a fights and people are either dying or nearly dying, guess what, buddy? Cleric, you're probably going to have to change a few spells. At least
Right.
take Healing Word. Listen, my cleric in Voldesplat, I only have Healing Word. I don't have any other healing spells.
I love that Eye of Cure Wounds as a spell I'll know forever. Like, I don't get a choice. I know that spell
I
forever.
do get a choice, and I chose not to know it because I have an item that gives it to me. Uh,
Hilarious.
um,
I will say this. I think Gene is right that story comes first. And again, if you're not going to be a healing cleric, listen, this is not just a game where we put on masks and our character sheets go away. Like, no, you're really sitting at a table with your real friends, I hope, um, playing a game together, talking about it at the table. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, are your friends might gonna give you shit about it? Like, are you really playing a cleric without cure wounds? Yeah, that might happen. But if there's a story to be told and they respect the story you're telling, then cool.
and 86 Me Daddy also asked a equally valid and likely more important question than which is, did you play gun soccer? And the answer to that, unfortunately, no, because I was a child when I was soccer. They don't give children guns. But I am a PA resident, so I can just get guns wherever I want. Pew pew pew! Guns, guns, guns.
Gene, as always, you are eloquent and verbose. And
And
man, just keep those hits coming.
walk into a Walmart, I show them my ID, they hand me a gun. That's how it works.
That is very true. Well, moving right along. In the what does it mean to be a cleric? You get to be this holy warrior, and again, depending on what your character's definition of holy is, um, when evil rears its ugly head, and not like, hey, that guy's kind of shady. I don't know if I trust him. But when it's like, oh, that thing with 4 mouths, 8 eyes, and 10 heads shows up, and we know it's an evil abomination, you kind of get to be this sort of shining light against the darkness, and especially when it comes to undead of any flavor, of any form, you are the greatest enemy of the undead. And turn undead is probably one of the best abilities in the game, bar none, to deal with undead, as well as destroy undead. Because let me tell you, I mean, it happened to us in Curse of Strahd when we had some lower level. I think it was skeletons or zombies kind of rolled up on us, and Gene just sort of looked at him funny and held up his holy symbol, and they turned to ash. Like, again, you get to have those cleric rock star moments of just back foul beast, and in they go back or they die. um so that's a cool. It's one of the coolest parts of being a cleric, and every cleric gets it, no matter if you are a nonsense cleric who loves pastries or a holy warrior, blasting light into the dark places of the world. Everyone can turn undead.
Yeah, no, undead are the worst. But you are the coolest when you're like, oh, they're undead? Let me handle this. hold, hold,
Got it.
hold my beer. Let me.
Yeah.
Rennie kind of tapped into this, which is their spell casting. They're full casters, which, for easy terms, they're one of the few classes that hit ninth level spells, and ninth level spells are game changing. They are incredible. Um,
Oh yeah.
and they can change their spells every day, except for the certain spells they get from their domain, which they just know forever and don't count against the spells they cast. So, as a full caster, you essentially get more spells every 1 to 2 levels and get more powerful spells every 2 levels. So every odd level. They rapidly begin to outshine some of those martial classes because their third and fourth and fifth level spells start really getting potent, and then when you start getting to the sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, it just starts getting insanity. Um, and they have, yeah, and they have some of just they if they know they're going into a situation like Rennie said, like you have your normal set of spells you know every day, but like going somewhere special, might take pass wall. You might take, or you're going into a situation where you don't know a lot of information. So you might take augury and scry and a few weird like reconnaissance spells that not every class could have fully available to. So you're about to do a lot of different things that are going to be skill checks. You can take the right spells to aid your party members. So they have a lot of prepared spells are just amazing. Um, plus, oh, you already put that, but yeah, plus with these prepared spells, like unlike a wizard who has to collect spell books and spend lots of money, or a sorcerer, bard,
Nerds.
what,
Nerds.
or like a sorcerer, bard, ranger, um, even like arcane trickster, knight.
Yeah, they're
You
all known
you
spells.
have a set number of spells, period. They never change, or they might change every level. You can change one out, get one in. Um, but these guys are like, cool. I can just change it. Oh, you went dark.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The power went out in my house.
Oh, good. But you're still on
Am I
the
still here?
you're still on the internet.
Beautiful.
You
Carry on.
still exist. And
Excellent.
perfect. Yeah.
Oh God, this is terrible.
Do you want to move on to the next parts before you lose
Yeah, I
power?
gotta know. Everything's fine.
Okay.
I'm still in the game. Hold on. Let me do this.
Oh, now you're dark. Oh, you're good. You look like a ghost.
We'll do that.
You look like a sweet ghost.
Wow, I do. I have like I have a thing.
Or yeah, you're this like.
Gene, you don't know if I'm. I could be a ghost. What do you know?
Oh, well, you're not a ghost anymore. Power went back.
Maybe I just died and came back.
Well, I'll have to turn back, foul beast.
Kind of just really quickly piggybacking off of that full caster and the being a prepared caster, you get the access to some of the best spells, in the game to deal with status effects. You know, lesser restoration, greater restoration, remove curse, calm emotions, which I pulled a fast one on Gene recently and
Fucking.
hit him with a calm emotions. He was very mad at me.
I was having one of our favorite persons who all characters always turn against the party and are extra successful when it happens. And he stopped it with a fucking calm emotion.
Damn right. But yeah, so that's kind of one of the, again, in that same healer niche, and you when there's a problem, when it's like your buddy just turned to stone, it's a problem, but you're at least someone who has a solution and not just I'm gonna run around screaming and hoping for the best. So yeah. Gene, you want to talk a little bit about their access to some of their unique out of character spells?
Ooh. Yeah. So I think while like besides making like raw skill checks where you can like investigate a scene and your GM can give you information, um, clerics have really neat spells when it comes to they can kind of learn a little bit about the meta plot that some of those story elements that as a normal person, as a player or the main character of a story, you don't know. And clerics can do that with spells like they can summon planar allies, or they can be like, cool, you know what I need to do? Fix a castle. And they go pay an angel to go do that. So it's something that like extra heroic that you couldn't do it. But really where I think the cool part of it is they get a spell, Speak with Dead, which is a little bit unique to them, or they can speak to dead bodies. So you could, like, if you didn't kill the person, because they generally won't talk to you if you killed them. Um,
Probably not.
but you can find out how a person died. I have definitely thrown Julia through some loops where I'm like, yeah, I take that skull for later, and she's like, I need to worry about this person. And I'm like, that's what I do. I need to know. But you can also do like auguries where you can kind of get senses for your future. You can commune with your god and you or religion or faith, and you can get yes and no answers that can kind of shape what you're going to do or affect getting information. Zone of Truth is a wonderful spell that forces someone to tell the truth if they fail their save, and so you can just question them and they have to answer truthfully or just not talk. And so you can tell if people
And you'll know. Yeah.
and they get some like magic circles that can like find things. They can also set traps for the future, which is super cool. I love it.
Glyph of Warding. Oh,
Or
such a good spell.
Symbol is super brutal, as I've seen recently.
Well, yeah, but
But yeah, and so they can do all these different summons, and also they have some like out of combat healing as well, where like they can spend a lower level spell slot to heal a decent amount to a group of people, and most people like only really bards can kind of do that for free. So like they at least have that extra resource. Rennie, why don't you talk about the greatest part about being a cleric?
very true. Real quick though, I wanted to talk about some of those unique spells. What I really love about a lot of those, Magic Circle, Speak with Dead, is that they're all spells that are in service of story, in service of plot. Because like those spells, you're not like, oh, and I'm getting secret information that no one knows. Like, no, you're getting information that is going to be relevant to the story at hand, and that's cool. But like Gene said, the probably the coolest ability of any cleric ever is divine intervention. Uh aka being a holy roller and rolling them bones and hoping and praying for the best. Yeah, divine intervention is phenomenal. Listen, it's got a low chance of success, but let me tell you, when you get to, when you look up and you go, "Oh, thunder Jesus, please thunder fuck that guy right there,"
In particular.
in particular, and you get that percentile die and you roll under your percentile die, it feels awesome. I have had it work only once ever for me, and it was amazing. Um, but yeah, divine intervention is great, and I love the idea. Right, after you're a 10th level cleric, up until you're a 19th level cleric, you're still praying to God. Like you've been doing all this stuff all this time. He or she is giving you power this whole time, and then as soon as you hit 20th level, he's like, you know what, I got you. You whatever you want, man. I like you.
Every week, you need a miracle? Woo, I got you,
Yeah.
buddy.
You just hit me with a text for that miracle. I'll be there. Yeah. So divine intervention, and again, the nice thing about divine intervention, it's kind of like cleric wish. That if you're, you don't need it to be. Please cast it. There goes my power again. Um. Oh, my spooky ghost. Oh, I'm a super spooky ghost.
You're like a dark Jedi. Unlimited
Um.
power.
I hate this harsh light. There we go. Um. So yeah, it's kind of this cleric wish where if you're a little clever about it and you word it right or you ask for something sort of out of the norm, you might find some really fun results from it.
I would like to also add that I think it's really the most cleric ability of it. And the reason why is because you are literally putting faith into it. Because you are using your entire action to roll a very low percentile chance of succeeding. And depending on the story, whether if your GM, most of these games, if you're playing them homebrew, your GM might give you something super dope. Or you mimic a cool spell like a cleric thing. And that's also neat. But really, I think it's that moment where, like, your character, instead of casting a spell, instead of fighting, they take those 6 seconds to pause and be like, listen, Thundercleese, please, 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 I need you. And, and paying off your devotion, it can pay off. So,
What? No, keep going, man.
yeah,
I got the next one.
all right. So going into, I talked a little bit about these full caster and what that means. So they get access to other high end spells. Sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth level. Rennie and I talked about a little bit, which is they are bananas. They're ground shaking, world changing, plane shifting spells. They really alter what the physics of what's about to happen around you, and they can also alter it in a way that the GM may not be prepared for, and that is cool. And they're also some of your more high damaging and high controlling, and you can again change the face of things. To add to their spell casting, they are considered ritual casters because you perform ceremonies and other fun. I was just gonna wrap them together.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
keep
yeah,
going, man.
sorry.
You're talking about spells. Rock it out.
Yeah, yeah. Let's give you the others. And so, ritual casting is when you have a spell memorized or prepared. Um, if it has the ritual tag, you can spend an additional 10 minutes with it to cast it without using a spell slot. Not all spells are ritual, but those that are, as long as you prepare them for that day, they can be used almost infinitely as long as you have the time. So, not only are you a powerful caster all the time when you're in combat using resources, some of those like weirder abilities like communing or auging or auguring, like seeing the future, those are rituals. Or even performing a marriage. That's a ritual you can cast without having to give in to using your personal resource. Um, yeah. So yeah, talk about the next cool part about that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about their combat role. We've talked about healing a lot, and that is very obviously, a good place. And you'll often find people say protect the healer, protect the cleric, which is not a terrible idea. But I'll say this: clerics have a fair bit of ways to buff themselves, buff the party. They can generally get pretty good armor classes. And the nice thing about being a cleric is you are a very versatile caster. You can stay at ranged and drop spells on your enemies. You can stay at ranged and drop spells on your friends. Certain clerics are made to jump into the battle and get dirty and and start swinging. um, Also, all clerics can kind of pull a little bit of AOE. It kind of comes down to how how confident are you to get into the thick of things. But the nice thing about cleric is, depending on the toolbox and the spells you chose that day, you really can kind of decide how you want to fight that day, which is cool. You might be like, "Hey, I'm gonna hold on to these big nasty spells, so I'm gonna hang back." Or, "Hey guys, I took these frontline spells. We're gonna get into it." You know? And they have this wonderful ability to sort of play in a lot of different realms. They may not be they may not have they may not be the best at any of those realms, but they're going to be effective in all of them. DJ Poser, what are your top 5 must-have cleric spells? I'll say this. I think it comes down to cleric to cleric. I literally am playing 2 different clerics right now, which could not be more different. Um, one and I will say this. I think Spirit Guardians, that's a must if you're, 5th level or higher. Uh, I think you either need to have Cure Wounds or Healing Word, because it can be upcast and you need to have an emergency heal. Whether it's in combat, hey, I need to get your butt up off the ground, or it's between combat and I have all these first level spell slots. Here you go, buddy. Um, I'm I think you need lesser or greater restoration. You gotta have, and if you don't have both, like if you have people in the party who can do one, you need to be able to do one and they can do the other. But if you don't, they're just such good go-to ways to handle it. Handle poison and petrification, charm, all that stuff. Um, I'll say this: I don't often use guiding bolt, but I think it's a very popular cleric spell, and I think it's useful. But I think at a certain level, you kind of grow out of it. Um, the spells that I find myself going back to constantly are things like remove curse, the restorations, healing, and the last spell that I think is a must is Aura of Vitality. That spell is freaking bananas. You know, having having a bonus action 2d6 heal for a minute makes that an amazing in combat spell and a tremendous out of combat spell. Uh Now it's a third level spell slot, but it'll pay out. So that's probably my answer for those.
I think for me is similar, but I vary a little bit. So healing word, definitely. Like a resto, lesser or greater, or remove curse, something to handle that kind of problem. Then it's revivify, uh,
Good call.
aid, and if I had a fifth, and let's say we're going low level, I think Spirit Guardian system or spiritual weapon if you don't have Spirit.
I was about to say, you're not going to put Spirit Guardians on the list? It's like one of the
No,
greatest
I had
card
to.
spells ever.
Yeah. You know, yeah. If you don't have someone who can handle the restos, if I could, I would switch out that for Spirit Guardians, but or Spirit Weapon. But I definitely think Revivify is always a good emergency third level spell, or any of those like insta kill abilities, and then
Yeah,
eventually Death Ward's solid. Especially,
Death
I think
Wards.
super high level Death Wards, because there's a plenty of insta death abilities that a Death Ward will just instantly stop, and it's well worth it.
I've definitely used that spell more than a few times. Um, all right, I'm gonna kind of wrap this up because we got a lot to go through today, guys. So
Oh,
out of
so many.
combat, yeah, out of combat, we talked about healing, we talked about buffing, investigation through magic, and the idea behind that is that you have things like Speak with Dead, which is, hey, I want to get clues to a problem. Maybe this person who died might know stuff about something related. They get detect magic, stuff like that. So you get to be out of combat. You get to use your magic to kind of suss out clues in a divine kind of way. Plus, out of combat, it can't be overstated. Your buff ability is amazing. I kind of overlooked enhance ability for a long time, but enhance ability is an incredible spell uh, for out of combat uses. If you're like, man, we really need to lift this bar, or like, oh, our rogue is checking for traps in this horrifying dungeon. Cool. Enhance ability, wisdom for perception. And then the last thing I'll talk about before we move into domains and their domains is there is Tasha's Cauldron of Everything has introduced some new options for clerics, which are pretty ridiculous, just straight up.
So good.
Uh, your channel divinity being able to restore your spell slots, insane. Because you get your channel divinity back at a short rest, so you essentially have a short rest, like free get spell slots back. It's pretty wild. Um, a lot of the spells that they added to the cleric list are, some of them make sense, like Aura Vitality, uh, Sunbeam, I guess
So
makes
everyone needs
sense.
lasers. Everyone
I
needs
guess
laser.
everyone needs a laser. But like they added some good spells to round out the cleric toolbox. Blessed Strikes is wonderful if your domain has sort of tried to pigeonhole you with your powered strikes, and you're like, that's not really how I roll. Blessed Strikes kind of gives you another option, which is nice. And cantrip versatility is just another in a long line of Tasha's introducing this system of being able to replace certain class abilities and class features as you level up. And cantrip versatility, I'll say this: I don't think cleric cantrips are fine. They're not great. They're not bad. I think it's fine if you find, hey, I'm not really using this cantrip, but it's okay otherwise. But I think that kind of wraps it up for what does it mean to be a cleric, and we're gonna move deeper into the dungeon of
So deep.
the domains, the divine domains.
So
And I'm gonna
many.
tell you guys, this is a large level of the dungeon.
Prepare thyselves.
All right, roll first, punk.
All right. Oh boy, we're back. And
Sweet,
we're back.
sweet. This feels right. This feels right. The cosmos are lining up.
Everything is coming up. Ready.
Let's see. Cleric powers go. Yep, there it is. 13. All right. So, we talked about it a little bit, but choosing your domain and choosing your god, these are all telling a story through your choices. And something I always like to do is I love to flavor abilities. I love to flavor um you know how I'm representing my god's power with these choices I've made. And domains are no different. Kind of like I said earlier about a cleric of Selune being either light or Twilight. I could see uh, uh, a cleric of Selune being a trickster domain. The things that happen at night, the cloak of darkness that allows you to move unseen. I would have no problem with that. As always, talk to your GM, uh, but always try to make a choice that tells a story. And Gene, I'm gonna just roll right into our first domain, and because we have a lot to do.
So much. So much.
So the first domain is the Arcana domain, which is great for if you worship gods like Coralon Larathian, Mistra, any number of very magically
A gun-toting wizard.
a gun-toting wizard. Absolutely. Um, I love that this is a thing you can be in D&D now. By the way, um, their initial abilities nice. Getting Arcana and 2 wizard cantrips is great. Like I said, the cleric cantrips are just fine. Having a couple of wizard cantrips to kind of round you out can really help give you some nice sort of scope, like a wider scope. Um, I will say I really love their channel divinity where they don't just start turning undead, they start turning everything that is not native to the material plane. Fey, elemental, fiend, doesn't matter. They're like, get out of here. Um, and I have to say, while again, it may not come up often if you fight thugs and stuff like that, but the moment that something rears its head from the lower planes, you can be like, how about not today? And the fact that you get a free banishment, quote unquote, free banishment on them is very potent. Um, their ability to be able to remove magical effects from as they gain levels to be able to remove magical effects from their party members when they cast spells on them, kind of like it makes you, if you buff your party members, you kind of get to double buff them, and like you buff them and maybe remove a negative magical effect on them. That's incredible. uh that kind of lets you be like, oh, this round, oh, there's a problem on you. Well, don't you worry about it, buddy. I'm gonna heal you, and you're gonna feel better. Don't even sweat it. Um, the arcane mastery that gives you high level wizard spells is honestly that's where shit gets a little off the rails, because clerics get access to some of the highest and nastiest magic out there, to then give them access to wizard spells that are the some of the highest and nastiest out there, it can start getting real silly. You could give a cleric wish, not even a problem. Clerics with simulacrum, so now there's more of you. It can really get wild if depending on the spells you use. I gotta say, and all of the high level spells that you get to choose from with this feature are sixth and up, which is where all the crazy spells live. So it's a very good feature. And some of their highlights from their domain spells, teleportation circle, that's an amazing. Clerics don't have a lot of like far-reaching mobility besides like plane shift. And again, you have to kind of leave the material plane to make that effective. But teleportation circle, having that mobility is amazing. Magic missile at low levels, you're never going to complain about that. Arcane eye for scrying and such, and yeah, they're honestly a very cool and very thematic cleric if you worship the 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 sort of arcane side of the world. And what's nice is you kind of get almost like a free multi-class with them, which is really neat. And again, you could straight up multi-class, and that might help you in certain ways, but you could go pure cleric of arcane and still feel like you're getting that arcane experience out of it. You want to kick the next one, Gino?
Yes, I will be speaking about the Death Domain, which is the current domain I use for
Ooh.
Charles Henri. This is a DM option because it's generally, I think, built to be a bad guy domain, but depending on if you talk to your GM or your character you are playing, you could make it work. Um,
I mean, it's funny. The more you look at those abilities, the more you're like, those are meant to just kill PCs, right? That's what they're there for.
do the job against it. uh, they start off with by getting some martial weapons, which is dope because they like hitting people with their weapons. Uh, their Reaper gives them essentially a free necromancy cantrip from Wizard, which generally take Chill Touch or Toll the Dead because it allows you to use necromancy cantrips on people within 5 feet of each other. So that's kind of like a little bit of a cheap twin spell, but it's cantrip, so
Yeah.
not terrible. Their channel divinity is a super necrotic smite, and it's pretty cool. I do like it a lot. I enjoy it. I will say, yeah, it's like 5 plus double your cleric level, so it can get pretty nasty. Um,
Yeah, it starts off small, but it ramps hard.
and eventually, when you hit, I think 6 or 8, you start ignoring necrotic resistance with your spells and channel divinity. So it definitely helps because there's some things that are just immune to necrotic, and a lot of your spells and stuff will become nonsensical. But those who are resistant can bypass, and that means you can make those undead feel really dead. Um, Improved Reaper is essentially same thing with where you can do your cantrips, but it goes from a first to fifth level spells. You now get that little 5 feet twinning effect of necromancy. It can get real salty, but again, that's very situational because there's not a you got to spend double the resources if they cost any components, and you know who knows what spells those are. Those are probably like your Rays of Enfeeblements, which is nice to double that. Blights are pretty solid choices for that. And their domain spells, they get some necromancy, which any cleric can do. This animate dead. So if you're definitely playing like a Merkel or some sort of uh, clerical faith or domain that doesn't care about undead, you can start making undead all day. Good times. Um, but their highlights is Ravenfieldment. I think it's a spell that not a lot of people use, but it's great. Like you're like, cool. We're fighting that giant that does 1 billion damage a hit. Great, he does half that.
Yeah, fuck that.
Vampiric Touch is a great melee self heal. I mean, Cloud Kill is brutal for people who have to breathe. And I will also say I really like Blindness Deafness, which is a necromancy spell, because it doesn't require concentration. So you can have your Spirit Guardians or whatever spell you're concentrating on. And if you eventually hit, the improved Reaper, you can now win it at low level opposed to higher level just hit. So I think it is a hyper dope domain. But I also again think it's a little situational because you need to get approval from your GM. A little bit powerful in the sense of like physical combat.
Oh yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
I've seen some other domains that are also brutal, so I'm not too concerned.
Oh, certainly, certainly.
All right,
Um,
it's all yours.
oh, perfect. How good did this line up, Gene? So the next domain we're going to talk about is the Forge domain, and guys, it's one of my favorites.
Okay.
First out of the gate, you get heavy armor and smith's tools. Heavy armor is great, and as a Forge cleric, you're all about that armor class. Like that's just part of the domain itself. Just hands you armor class, so you just want as much armor as you can. Plus, you can just make it just whenever you want. Um, I will say, Blessing of the Forge is pretty phenomenal at low level. Handing out a +1. Now, at low level, your GM is probably not throwing at you, magic item only monsters. Like, only magical weapons can hurt monsters. But, listen, if there's someone in the party with a crap AC, or that, you want to make sure your fighter or your rogue gets their hit off, giving them that +1 at low levels is really going to make a difference. Um, Channel Divinity, their Artisan's Blessing it's amazing. With an hour of time and up to 100 gold of materials, you can make any mundane object. Just realize the implications of any mundane object. Uh, so if you're clever with this, you can not get away with a lot, but you can certainly introduce some very powerful elements to the game if you can just create stuff. You know, I found when I played the Forge Cleric that I play is I pretty much spent the first, I don't know, 8 levels of the game just equipping my party. Just, oh, what do you need? New shield? Here it is. Oh, you need half plate? Give me some time. And I literally spent a lot of time creating, equipping my party, which is really fun. But maybe if you're a little more devious, you could get away with some stuff too. Soul of the Forge and Saint of the Forge and Fire are just great at making you super tough, more armor class. Eventually, you get immunity to fire, starts out as resistance. And then you get resistance to non magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, which again, is a wonderful thematic representation of, as you have hammered and beat metal into shape, you in ways have been beat and toned into shape as well. Um, so they're very good defensive. Some of their domain spells that are worth mentioning: Identify is awesome to have as a cleric. Heat metal, which is amazing because druids and I think bards are the only ones who get heat metal, and a cleric with heat metal is a hell of a thing. There's two spells that I really want to focus on here, and they are Fabricate and Creation. Animate objects is wonderful. You can bring things to life. Wall of Fire, it's a wall of fire. It's pretty good. Um, but Fabricate and Creation are two spells that literally, there's a lot of talk in the D&D circles of like breaking the economy, and how, if magic exists, how does a carpenter make a living when you just like fart out magic? and you made a house. Creation and fabricate are really wonderful spells that, again, with a little bit of cleverness, you can overcome a lot of mundane obstacles. Oh, there's a chasm, I make a bridge. I just, guys, give me a minute, give me 10 minutes, I'll make a bridge. Oh man, like we need a wagon to haul away all this gold, all this stuff. Yep, guys, no problem, just give me a few. Like, you can just create things out of the air. And again, depending on how devious you are, is how much of a problem that's going to be at your table. But it also just makes you kind of the most useful person in the room at any given time. If there's ever a mundane object that someone needs, given time, you can make it. I'm a big fan of Forge Clerics. I really like that creative aspect. Um, but yeah, Gene, you want to talk a little bit about Grave Clerics?
Yeah, I mean, grave clerics are more of the playable side of death, where they kind of are. Think of them as they fight the undead threat, but they also help people, as they pass on. Like they help guide people through. The Circle of Mortality is super dope. It's their like base ability, which allows them to essentially heal anyone from 0 hit points. They just max heal them when they use healing on them. So they really are that like last line of defense between life and death for characters,
Yeah.
and their maximized healing kind of shows that. Plus, they can then bonus action and 30 feet range spare the dying. Super useful cantrip for stabilizing people. Um, they get Eyes of the Grave, which is it lets them detect undead, which I think honestly anything that gives you a detection for kind of free is cool because it lets you sense weird creatures. It kind of gives you that like a little bit of the paladin sense. And so if if someone's pretending to be like a vampire's infiltrated a court or something, it lets you suss these kind of things out, which is likely your job. Um, it's situationally useful. Depends on the undead, or if you're like hanging out in the woods, you're like probably undead. Path of the Grave is kind of awesome because it lets you channel divinity to give someone vulnerability. So if like your rogue's up next or your paladin's about to drop a smite, it's real nice to make sure that the person they're about to hit really feels it. So but the downside of it is it is an attack roll, so it has to be something that rolls to hit. Now that can tee you up for like cause wounds, you know. Wait, that's not what it's called anymore.
Inflict, Gene.
Wounds. Sorry. Second edition is called cause wounds. Sorry, Uh, um, yeah, and that's really nice for a tee up on any of those, especially if like someone hit them with like a guiding bolt or something beforehand. You can really, make sure that knife gets twisted. Sentinel at Death's Door, you're never gonna be mad if your player character has that. It will you can cancel crits, and those are some of the most devastating things that can happen to a PC. A lot of monsters hit hard, and that double damage, woo-wee. Those crits can really. I've eaten a few crits in my recent games that went from like I'm okay to I'm down now. I will be unconscious. I will be sleeping. I'm gonna be honest here. I think their 17th level ability at Capstone of Keeper of the Souls, it's kind of lackluster. They get to heal someone within 60 feet of the amount of hit dice a monster had that was just slain. For 17th level, man, we saw that fucking Arcane Boy gets fucking a 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level wizard spell. If that's the bar, I don't know, man. Or Forge Cleric right before that gets immunity to fire and damage and other stuff. Like, I feel like that Keeper of Souls just doesn't add up to that. Not saying Grave Cleric is bad. All Grave Cleric kind of leading up to Keeper of Souls, amazing. I just think that it's a little lackluster on that side. They have some cool domain spells. They're definitely about keeping people alive, but I think having Blight is an awesome spell because you have a really nice offensive spell that's generally reserved for druids and maybe bards, but I think just druids.
Sorcerers get it.
Oh, sorcerers. And Raise Dead, having that in the bank. I think they also get Revivify. So having some quick like bring people back from the dead spells always memorized or always ready to be cast, I think is a huge load off you picking weird spells that might be fun to use from Cleric.
Yeah, definitely. Next up, we have the domain of knowledge. Some gods that might represent this are, oh, Gene, what's the dwarven
Doomathoin.
Doomathoin? Thank you. I was thinking in my head, I was thinking Kozuth, and I'm like, that's not even
I mean, he
1%
could be a
correct.
god of knowledge, but he's more a god of wisdom.
Right, right, right. But yeah, Doomathoin would be a great knowledge god. Um, there are plenty of other, prophecy gods, or just gods that are seek knowledge. These clerics, I actually really like these clerics. It would certainly take you would have to know going into it. They're very much a skill cleric, and they're very good at uncovering clues about the world around them. So you're definitely going to be pretty embroiled in the plot, or be very responsible for kind of pushing story forward. Um, at the right out the gate, they get a bunch of skill trainings, which is that's awesome. And depending on your lineage and and your background, you can start the game with quite a few more skill trainings than your average cleric. Uh, their channel divinity, I'm a very big fan of. While reading thoughts is always a good it's always a nice tool to have when you have a KGGM, or you want to get a better read on social situations. Um, I really enjoy the sort of free suggestion, quote unquote, that comes out of that. You can sort of read surface thoughts, and then you can look at someone and be like, "Hey, buddy, why don't you tell me about this thing you're thinking about?" And all of a sudden, your GM's like, "Oh, you mean this story point I was going?" You just sort of pull the plot right out of the NPCs, without being too mean about it. I really like Visions of the Past. It feels kind of like psychometry, where you can hold objects or stay in areas and sort of learn things about past users and about who's come and gone from an area. And again, it's there to serve more story and more plot, which is always cool because you're going to get insights, and it's always good to let your GM know. I mean, he or she probably already knows what you're playing, I hope. But letting them know you're going to play a knowledge cleric is, they're going to have to think of some things they may not have thought of in their plotting and story, because you're going to be able to extract information from things they may not expect. Some of their domain spells that I'm a fan of, Confusion is just a phenomenal debuff spell. Non-detection, so you can kind of keep yourself safe from scrying eyes. And Suggestion. Suggestion is a low-level spell, but it has some pretty powerful implications when people fail their saves. Having to follow a course of action for 8 hours, that can be real rough.
Definitely. All right. The bread and butter cleric, the money maker, the life cleric. Listen, they're the best healers. Period. They have
Yeah.
had
Wait, Gene, I thought it was Living La Vida Loca
yeah,
clerics.
living La Vida for Loco clerics. They get heavy armor, which they get tanky, which is great, high AC. They get boosted heals, and that means like, well, most people are like, all right, I'm gonna drop a cure wounds on you because that D8's important. They can throw around healing words, and they heal better than most basic cure wounds.
Yeah.
Also, as they get more powerful, all their heals start healing themselves as well. Um, if a battle looks like it's turning and your party just ate that dragon's breath and everyone's on death's door from like a busted initiative roll, a well placed channel divinity of preserve life, you can bring your party back from like the brink of death. It is incredible, and then throw on like a mass healing word on top of that, and you can get some serious business done for everyone. Their capstone's incredible. It is the one of the most insane things where they
It's
just
wild.
they just stop rolling dice for any healing they do, and they just heal you the max, and that
Right?
is stupid. That is just stupid.
Ludicrous.
It's ludicrous.
Ludicrous.
Um, I mean, so to kind of like I don't know, their domain spells are essentially your traditional D&D cleric spells that you would mostly take, like bless and cure wounds and all these healing people spells and restorations. They're like your go-to I need to support and heal people spells that really free you up to do whatever you want in the other side of the cleric like spell list, because you have all the basic tools you need to make sure your party and yourself won't die. You can start taking like spirit guardians and be like, cool, I'm gonna keep healing people, and if you want to get near me, well, get hurt and be slow. Like, so they're amazing, best healers in the game, though there are some healers that can definitely contend with them in burst shots. um but yeah, I mean, they're your traditional player's handbook healer, and guess what, man? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Is all I'm saying about them.
You know what? That's pretty much the tagline I think for Life Cleric is. All right. So, again, another PHB hero is the Light Cleric, or as I like to think of them, the Laser Cleric. They again, thematically, they're all about, they channel the power of the sun, the power of light in whatever fashion you decide that means. But really, a lot of their spells are, and I shoot him with a laser. Oh, did he look at me funny? I shoot a laser into his eyeballs. um, warding flare. It's a really nice defense. Throwing disadvantage at someone, because a lot of time, you don't want to be hit as the cleric. You don't want to be hit, period. But just having a built-in defense is really nice. And then down the line, it gets better where you can start helping your party members, which is phenomenal since this cleric is a bit more offensive than your maybe standard cleric. I really like their channel divinity. It does really solid AoE damage. It's like 2d10 plus cleric level or something, and it's pretty mean. But the thing about it that I think I like the most is that it dispels magical darkness, and there's not a level attached to that. There's not a dispels magical darkness from a spell. So like, if you have a demon who uses a supernatural quote unquote ability to make magical darkness, well, even if it's not a spell, you don't care. You pop it away. So that's really cool. And there's not a lot of ways to get rid of magical darkness. So it's really nice that you just have a channel divinity that shines light in the dark places, kind of thing. Um, Corona of Light is it's pretty messed up as a capstone, and I mean that in a really good way. First off, you get to emit sunlight, which is important versus specific creatures, mostly vampires. But
Because the daylight spell does not make sunlight. That's
right, that always bothered me that they would name a spell daylight, and they're like, it's just light. And you're like, what? No, whoa, 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 whoa. But yeah, you get to emit sunlight, which is important for certain reasons, and you give your enemies disadvantage versus most of the spells that you get through this class. But the nice thing is, it also works with for your other party members if they take a certain kind of spell that deals radiant damage
or
or
fire.
fire. I think it's
Yep.
radiant or fire. So, like, again, if you have your wizard buddy and he looks at you and he's like, "Is it time to put on the spotlight?" and you put on the spotlight, Well, he knows maybe now it's time to drop some fireballs or whatever it may be. And it's really nice that there is a built-in kind of team play, not only defensively but offensively as well. Some of their domain spell highlights is they have a lot of potent damage spells that don't require concentration. They have a few that do, but there's no other cleric in the game that gets fireball unless you are an Arcana domain. But again, you'd have to choose six. So there's no other domain spell cleric that gets fireball, which is pretty tight. Um, and you pretty much get all the burninate spells. And they are a very blasty cleric in that way. But again, the nice thing about cleric is even though your domain very much speaks to offensive, there's nothing saying you can't also take all of the healing, restoration, etc.
All right, I will talk about a cleric that I do not like, and I will openly say that when I start. But we'll talk about it, as I am completely unbiased most of the time. All right, nature domain.
He said biasedly.
They would, I guess, be an alternate druid. Uh they get a druid cantrip and then kind of like a cool naturey or survival or a skill you would use, in a survival setting. Um they get heavy armor, which is I think a strange flex, but you know what? They need something. Um well,
It is a weird flex.
it's a weird flex because most druids, when you think of them, don't have heavy armor. So them getting heavy armor, you're like, okay, sure. Um,
Yeah.
they get the ability to charm animals and plants, which is nice. But I don't know if that's going to be super useful at higher level. I mean, I guess if the campaign is built in like this very natural rural setting, I could see you being a nature cleric. But still, I don't. I feel like you would play a druid. But continuing on, higher it's not very useful, I don't think. But it's highly situational, which I think is my problem. If it was a little bit less situational, I'd probably be a little bit uh happier with it. Their dampened elements is actually pretty nice. It's a defense against elemental attacks where they can apply to themselves or others, which is really neat because you can do it, all the time as a reaction. You don't have a lot of reactions as a cleric. And that I think you'll use a lot more than many of your other abilities, just because you take so much damage of types. And then their master of nature, I think it lets them like kind of command their already charmed animals, and it's okay. Again, it's highly situational. This 17th level calf zone, like you can be like, plants, man, can you like not attack us today? And they're like, I guess
Right.
sure. And you're like, all right. I don't know. I feel like they didn't really put a lot of thought into, I think, nature cleric, on my opinion. Where like if I were wanted to play some sort of nature cleric, I would just play a druid. Whether that be, if I don't want to shapeshift, I could play like any of the shepherds, of the different lands. Or there's so many different druids that
Right. You could just represent your faith by roleplay. You
yeah.
don't need your class to give
I
it to
mean,
you.
they have some decent spells which are kind of cool for a cleric, like Grasping Vine and Windwall. But like, I'm gonna be honest here. My opinion is just play a druid. I understand you might want to wear plate mail as a druid, and that's rough, buddy. Well, maybe you should be a druid who multi-class into one level of cleric, wear all the heavy armor.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm sorry for those people who really like nature cleric. You know what? You should tweet me saying, "Hey, you're wrong about this at Dungeon and hashtag Dungeon Delvers." Be like, nature cleric's the best. I guarantee you're
Get him.
probably wrong.
Get him.
Probably wrong. Next.
So the next thing we're gonna talk about are the order clerics, and I gotta say, I kind of really like order clerics for a variety of reasons that I'll get into. but I dig them a lot because they almost feel like a magic light cleric. Because a lot of their abilities are like they command a battlefield and they command their enemies to act in a certain way. And you could kind of just see someone standing, at the top of the stairs, pointing and making exclamations, and people around them kind of just following based off the aura of authority they give off. But they're really cool. They get heavy armor, so great. You get your plate mail eventually, and you get a skill proficiency in either intimidation or persuasion. Voice of authority is just phenomenal. That you can give your allies attacks when you cast spells. It's just it's incredible. That means not only can you give a helpful benefit to someone, you can also be like, "Oh, hey, barbarian, are you really mad at that guy? Cool, get him, get him for me." Um, and again, I like that voice of authority. You can just be like, "Take him down," and you cast a spell, and then they takes him down. So that's pretty cool. I like their channel divinity. I think it is very powerful because it works on people, but it is a bit situational. It's not bad by any stretch. I think it definitely has its place. Um, but the ability to make each creature kind of succeed in a wisdom saving throw or be charmed by you is great, but um charm is very easily kind of defeated by a lot of creatures. The nice thing about this is that it makes them drop what they're holding if they are affected by it, which can be really powerful. Make someone drop the MacGuffin, drop their weapon. It can be really good. um Order's Wrath makes you I really like I'm sorry, I've skipped over Embodiment of Law, which has a built-in quicken spell for specifically enchantment spells, which is just amazing. So again, it's all your buff spells, not all of them, but a number of buff spells, and you can still kind of, you know, you can make it work with Voice of Authority, which is pretty wild. That you have a built-in combo within your own class features. Um, I like Divine Strike a lot. And I only mention their Divine Strike. We've kind of skipped over a lot of the Divine Strikes because they are all the same, more or less, with different damage flavors for clerics. Theirs I like is because it's psychic, and psychic's one of those harder damage types to resist. And then Order's Wrath is just wow, is it mean? Um, when you can kind of hit someone and sort of mark them for your buddies, so that next time that someone hits them, they just get a free 2d8 psychic damage, and it's unlimited, which is really why 2d8 extra damage. That's not going to break the game, but being able to do that consistently when you melee, that's freaking powerful. And again, you're comboing that with, well, I'll attack on my action, bonus action spell. Oh, my bonus action spell was enchantment. Hey, buddy, hit them. Oh, there's a lot of, you get to kind of, if you work within the purview of an order cleric, you can get some really fascinating and powerful stuff going. Um, I think some of their domain spells that are great is slow. Slow is just a super powerful spell, or a debuff spell. Dominate person. That's it's a hell of a drug to be able to just go, hey you do what I say now. And I think this domain is quite good, but I think it'll really shine in some more humanoid heavy or political campaigns. Like if your GM is running a political campaign, I'll tell you, you will have a real good time as a cleric of order. Um,
Absolutely.
you wanna hit our next one, Gino?
Oh yeah, yeah. We're grinding through it, guys. We're almost done with these domains. There's so many. Yeah. This is a new one, and it's actually really cool. It's the peace domain. They get a skill proficiency, generally like a persuasion or a insight. They get to talk to people and really understand their feelings. Um, their emboldening bond is their primary what makes it them. It's really awesome. It essentially gives you a bless/guidance that you can use once around for 10 minutes. That's awesome. It's almost better than a bardic inspiration, and you get it at second level, I think, or for yeah. No, you get it at first level, which is amazing.
That's first, man. Yeah, you
'Cause
get it right at the
you get
gate.
a whole bunch of them equal to your proficiency. Their Bomb of Peace is their channel divinity. It's super cool. It gives them essentially a free move, and if they pass by their allies, they can heal their allies a bunch of HP just by passing by them.
Yeah, and
And
you don't provoke opportunity attacks.
yeah,
Oof,
it's like a free.
very
It's like a
nice.
dash that also sprinkles them with magic healing dust. It's weird, but also really cool because you can run around a battlefield, get your friends healed, and still be doing stuff. Protective bond, when you kind of hit that 6th level thing, it ups your new emboldening bond, where everyone who's bonded together can take damage for each other as a reaction, and a lot of people don't have a lot of reactions depending on what class you play or feat combination you have. So if you don't have a reaction, you can jump in the way for your allies, and that's real great for a barbarian or a fighter or someone who has a ton of hit points. You'd be like, yeah, I take it. Oh, cool. I still take half. Great, great, great. I don't mind taking some damage. Yeah, let your high HP party members kind of really jump in the way, but also it's a 30-foot teleport. They teleport to you, which means that some of that mobility lacking in certain other classes can really get pretty nutso. If a dragon swoops in and attacks you, and you're like, cool, my barbarian who was a bunch of feet away now teleports there.
Yeah.
It's
He's here now, or she's here
yeah,
now.
or they're there now and they're about to hit you. Um, I think expansive bond is awesome. It just again, this whole thing is based on your emboldening bond. It makes it a much longer range, and it also makes it so that people jumping in the way of their friends uh take less damage. They take half. It's awesome. I would say there's domain spell highlights. Rary's telepathic bond is being able to kind of talk telepathically with each other for an hour. Super awesome. It's a ritual
Yeah.
spell, so you can also do it ritually, so you don't have to waste spell slots. I mean, heroism is just a great spell. Temps and immune to fear, great. Uh, and Autolic's resilient fear sphere is a good way to give either someone protection or to be like, that problem is gonna chill out over there for a second while we figure this out. I think there's a very neat RP side of the peace domain because you're always trying to kind of help others and you're really pressing for the group. Not to say you can't do damage and do clericy goodness, but they're all about kind of creating this bond between a party and really emphasizing. I could definitely see this priest as your chaplain in like a small squad where they really keep you band of brothers together and
Yeah,
I could
that's a good interpretation.
that could be a fun peace domain where it's like I gotta wage war so that I can forge peace. Like that's that could be fun. Rennie, why don't we talk about one of your favorite versions of Cleric?
Oh, I fucking love them. Real quick though, Gene, I want to go on a tangent. So I now that I've been looking over this order domain, and I already play enough clerics, but I really want to play a cop cleric. And I just want to be like, get on the ground. I said get on the ground and dominate person people.
Definitely.
I like the idea of like a grizzled sergeant or maybe a detective who's an order cleric who is just out there the law. I am the
Yeah,
law.
you make Judge Dredd the fucking order
Yeah, oh, dude,
cleric.
straight up. No, he'd be such. Oh man, cool, Gene, cool,
Cool, cool, cool, cool, cool.
cool, cool, cool. Um, so back to our domains. This is one of my favorite domains. It is the Tempest domain. And if you've ever wanted to know what it would be like to play Thor in D&D, play a Tempest domain cleric, and you will feel the power of lightning flow through you. Um, they get martial weapons and heavy armor right out the gate. Like no two ways about it. They are here to wear armor and kick ass. Um, Wrath of the Storm. I'm gonna say this. I like Wrath of the Storm at low levels. If they touch you, they just take lightning. I will say at higher levels, it doesn't feel quite as great. It doesn't scale very well. Because it's always just 2d8 lightning. So like when you're first to, sixth level, hey man, take 5 more damage, take 10 more damage. Cool. Nice. When you're like 15th level and you're like, yeah, take 6 lightning. That's right. You fucking look out. It just doesn't feel like it has the same punch. But it's still solid.
I mean, I think it
Uh,
combos well with their later ability.
it does. And I'm gonna get to that. I agree. But their channel divinity is really what we got to talk about tonight. And I think that whoever wrote this was like, maybe they are really in love with Chris Hemsworth, or they just I don't know. But being able to maximize any thunder or lightning damage you deal, because that's the craziest part. It's not deal like of a spell you cast. That's not what it says. It says thunder or lightning damage you deal. So if you have a staff of thunder and lightning, for instance, if you have a magic item that can drop a storm of vengeance, not saying there's a lot of them out there, but um, you know, you can just be like, oh, this lightning bolt would do 10d6 to you. Nah, just 60. Just it's 60 now. It can get real out of hand with certain spell and or magic item combinations. But the fact that you get them back on a short rest as well is kind of insane. But I'm gonna move away from it because it's just honestly it might be too much. I still love it, but it might be too much. I really like their Thunderbolt Strike or whatever it's called, where you essentially, anytime you deal lightning damage to a creature that is large or smaller, you get a free push of 10 feet. And that's kind of what I think Wrath of the Storm is still kind of good in the long term, because if they hit you, you can zap them for lightning, even if it's 5 or 6, but they automatically get pushed if they're of the size category. And it's nice because it's no save. It's just you took lightning damage, go away, just back up. Um, and that's nice. Some of their domain spell highlights: Call Lightning, just an incredible AOE lightning spell, which again you can maximize. Thunder Wave, nice low level damage for those lower levels, and you get a push out of it. Destructive Wave, Destructive Wave maximized. I'm gonna tell you, your GM is not going to like you. When you roll 30 damage plus 5d6 radiant and knock people prone, your GM is just he's gonna look at you, and you're gonna know that bad things are on the horizon for you. Um, I really like that they get Control Water. Control Water can be a very useful spell. Shatter, again, AoE thunder damage. Um, so they are a really awesome blast cleric who had a baby with a really awesome melee cleric. And now the thing is, while that's awesome and that's cool, they're almost too focused at their job. So they are phenomenal in melee combat. They are phenomenal at dropping these thunder bombs and lightning bombs on people, but they're almost so good at it that like they kind of lack in the healing and other departments. And again, they have the standard use of other cleric spells, but if you're making this cleric who's here to kick ass and shoot lightning, you're probably taking spells that are more in line with that sort of theme. Um, but yeah, you can have a lot of fun as a Tempest cleric.
Now, the Trickster Cleric, or the Domain of Trickery, which, could be represented by one of my favorite gods, Baris, the halfling god of trickery and misadventure.
Ooh,
Um,
deep cuts, Sheen. Deep
deep
cuts.
cuts. I love. What would Baris do if he were here today?
Probably kick an ass or two. That's what Brando Bars do.
uh, so Blessing of the Trickster, I think, is very good, even low level, and I think, especially if you have people who cannot sneak in your party, heavy armor, medium armor, that disadvantage, you can kind of cut that. Or if you already have a very sneaky party, you can guarantee or nearly guarantee success. And it's unlimited. You can just grant you could just do it to everyone or one person at a time for an hour, and it's really, really good. If you can't do it to yourself, that's the key. Um Invoke Duplicity is hilarious. It is very strong because it lets you do touch spells at a much further distance. Also, if you are a melee cleric, it allows you to press things for advantage if you're fighting alongside or with your duplicates.
Yeah.
You can kind of create your own advantage, which also means that if you were to be a little bit of a rogue tip, it might not be the worst. Sorry. Then they have Cloak of Shadows, which
it lets you turn invisible for a round.
Oh, I fucking hated that. That's why I ignored it. All right. So, Cloak of Shadows. It lets you turn invisible for a round, and it lasts until the end of your next turn. Here's my problem with that. A, it's a channel divinity. So it's using one of your cool resources that you could do for duplicity or turning undead. B, it's just not good. Where it's just I think that if you're spending a whole action for it, it should not be it should last for either a minute until you do a thing, or it should be an amount equal to your proficiency bonuses you can do it per day, or to your wisdom mod. Just not using your already cool resource of channel divinity, which is clearly invoke duplicity, because that gets augmented later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think the duration is either a little short, or maybe they should make it cost a different resource. Divine Strike, I think it's a little weak, honestly, because there's just poison damage. There's a lot of stuff that is either resistant or completely immune to poison. Most undead are completely immune. So, taking out a large category, I mean, you self-turn undeads, but you've just taken out a lot of things that cannot be used against. I think improved duplicity is literally amazing because you are a human clown car where you could like jump behind a rock and then 5 of you run in separate directions, and that's just fucking hilarious.
It's just that's you know what that's why you come to play D&D. It's
Yeah.
for shit like that.
Yeah, where you could be your own Three Stooges act. I think that's
Yep.
just amazing.
Exactly.
I mean, their domain spells are actually really cool. They're highlights. Charm Person, very nice spell, especially for doing this trickery and trying to get people to like you. Disguise Self, amazing. Lets you kind of change who you are. I mean, Mirror Image, hyper useful, especially because you're focusing on all these. Think about this: if you mirror image yourself and invoke duplicity with greater duplicity, you could have like 15 of yourselves.
You could be a marching band.
A one-man band. Get some thaumaturgy cast. All
right, Gene. Other character concept.
One-man band. Dimension Door. What a great spell. It's one of the weaknesses that you can shore up as a cleric, being able to teleport around and take other people with you. Modify memory can be used in the jankiest of means. And I think it has very unique spell choices, which are very highly thematic. You're a prankster, or you are always trying to win through a little bit of deceit. But you could be a good person. Like Brando Boris is a good god, but it's all about stealing from bad
A
people
good
and
God.
burying things or winning through trickery and deception against greater and stronger foes. And so I think the Trickier Domain is a super fun cleric, and I think they're generally clerics that you will see in, I would say, lighter armor, only for the sake of, because they are generally sneakier or stealthy sometimes. Doesn't mean they have to be. That does not have. You could literally be pulling the greatest trick of by being like a full plate, like a half plate wearing, cleric who looks all clerical, but on the side you're pulling sneaky missions and pulling cons, and that could be a fun version of that kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good for that one.
Yeah. They're pretty great. As many people might already know. So next on the list is a domain I've talked about several times on this stream before actually getting to them, and it is the Twilight domain. I like that out the gate you get martial weapons and heavy armor. So if you need to step up to the plate in a melee sense, you totally can. Eyes of Night, I feel like is kind of good and kind of not. Um, because it gives you 300-foot dark vision, which is just amazing. Um, and I like the fact that you can share that dark vision with a number of creatures if they huddle around you. So like I can see that being cool, but like how often are you gonna need 300-foot dark vision? Again, I don't know. Maybe there's an answer there that I'm not thinking of, but it's just dark vision, and a lot of races get dark vision. But I'll tell you, your human buddy, or if you are a human cleric playing one of these, you're gonna feel awesome. You're gonna feel great.
So good.
Um, I really love Vigilant Blessing. Uh, and I like it a lot because it's unlimited. So just as an action, you just give someone advantage on their next initiative roll. You could literally wake up in the morning, high five your rogue or your fighter or whoever, be like, "Cool, next time there's an initiative, buddy, you're the shit." And essentially between combats, you can just decide, "Hey, I have advantage on initiative the next time. You do," and that's just nice to always be able to kind of just pass around. Um, and there are some classes that take a lot of use, like certain rangers, certain rogues, that get a lot of use out of higher initiative. So, if they're around, you could really let them get the most out of their abilities, which I love. Twilight Sanctuary, I gotta say, I think it's really good. I think it's slightly underpowered, but I still think it does such a good job of representing what this class is all about. Because you get to kind of just make this little starlit sphere around you. Um, and you know you can just look around. If someone is in it, you can be like, here's temporary hit points plus like a d6 plus cleric level, and it might start out just kind of like a few, but get to ninth level, d6 plus 9, no one's going to be sad about getting double digit temporary hit points for just like hanging around you. um and being able to end charmed and frightened, that's just icing on the cake. um I love Steps of Night, especially because you get it at sixth level, and being able to get a fly speed in darkness for a minute at lower level, like that sixth level, I feel is pretty strong. It might, again, you get more mobility as you get higher level, or you get other casters or characters with mobility, but having it early on, I find is actually pretty strong overall. Um, and their Twilight Shroud is honestly, it's the only thing that I think is just kind of mediocre. It's just not okay. It's just okay. Giving half cover while they're in your Twilight Sanctuary, it's nice. It's just more free buffs. You're already giving out a little bit of buff. Now it's just a AoE buff, which again is nice, but as a capstone ability, it's okay. Um, I really do like some of their domain spells because they get access to things like greater invisibility, which not a lot of clerics do. Um, Circle of Power, honestly, is one of my favorite spells they get access to just be like, spells, magic, not for me. I'm not about that. And you can just sort of give advantage to yourself and people around you to just be like, we don't want your magic bullshit here. Which I think is really great. Moonbeam, phenomenal offensive spell. Lehman's Tiny Hut for survival and exploration. And finally, See Invisibility has, because of the Curse of Strahd stream that me and Gina are in, has honestly become one of my more favorite spells because you never know when there's an invisible bad guy walking up on you. But with See Invisibility, I can guarantee you your GM is going to create an invisible bad guy to be sneaking up on you real quick. And you get to feel awesome that you know that it's there. So yeah, I think Twilight is really RP heavy. It's got wonderful thematics, and I don't think any one of their abilities are astounding, but I think that they're effective at what they do.
And to
And
add,
then Gene, last but not least.
well, I'm gonna add to yours before I do that.
Oh,
Uh,
please.
Honestly, with their like kind of main ability of that Twilight Sanctuary, Circle of Power and Twilight Sanctuary, everyone's gonna want to stay within 30 feet of you anyway. So if you have a Circle of Power up, that's just even better. They're like, cool, we're
Yeah.
also better here.
Yeah.
And now, last but not least, whoa, what is it good? Okay,
Is
that's
it
all.
good for? I mean, it
Absolutely
feels like we
nothing.
went through a war to
Gotcha.
get here, Gene.
I feel like it. Some sort of holy war, if you will. Eh?
Oh.
All right. The war. I mean, pretty obviously, you get martial weapons and heavy armor. You're made to hit good. Um, you know, I think their first level ability lets them get an extra bonus action attack attached to the attack action, which is nice. But if you dabble in any way to get you blade cantrips, or when you're higher level and you're just casting spells, don't think it's going to come out as useful. But I think very much low level, like definitely first through fifth, you're going to definitely, it's going to make money for you. Their Channel Divinity is super cool because when it starts out, it pretty much guarantees that they're going to hit their opponent as a cleric when you swing, and that's kind of useful. I mean, it can also technically be used with like spiritual weapon as well, so super nice. Then as they get a little bit more powerful, that ability extends to allies where you can drop a +10 to their hit, and that can be useful for your rogue, or if you're a cleric, you could be like, I'm gonna touch you with an inflict wounds, and I hit. Can't do nothing. Wiggly wham wazzle. Their capstone is definitely solid. Resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, but non-magical. It doesn't have flair, but it gets the job done. Of just being like, cool, I'm in the
Yeah.
middle of war. I take damage. I'm here, and I'm good at it. I think their domain spell highlights for me is like Divine Favor and Crusader's Mantle, which that
Yeah.
bonus action or action where you give everyone around you either yourself an extra D4 radiant, or you give everyone around you and you a D4 radiant. You're just gonna make everyone hit harder. No one's gonna be mad at that. Hold monster is extremely powerful. Especially if you could paralyze an opponent and then just everyone bash him, great. It is very strong thematics. Like it generally kind of puts you almost in like a general-ish or like elite warrior where you can aid others or you can kind of help yourself into making
Right.
sure that your hits count. I can definitely see like gladiator or like a heavy weapon master really going to town being like I remember we had a grumpy cleric who was a war cleric and he was pretty fun in our game, like old retired sergeant, and it worked out. I think it actually felt well, and the idea of like being low level is because you're old, so you kind of forgot a lot of those fighting techniques. Now you're
Right.
you're remembering as you level up. Was a nice fun story. So that is last but not
Gene, we did it. We did it. We fought the
dude.
Holy War and we won.
I feel like we just read the Torah of Divine Domains.
Is that the Torah of D&D?
Yeah, like dude, that was so many.
It's a lot, and I guess it makes sense. There's a lot of gods. There's a lot of purviews, but
Yeah.
let's move in to the weaknesses of clerics.
Uh, I labeled that clerical weaknesses.
You should have spelled like weaknesses wrong.
Oh,
Clerical
that would have
weaknesses.
been good.
All right, roll your dice, sir.
Okay. 18.
Oh, I got my work cut out for me. I hope I just get a 19 just to beat you by one.
By
Like,
one.
just so I'm looking at your score going,
Not today, Satan. All right.
nah.
14. Well, I get to start with the clerical weakness. So, they have a few weaknesses because obviously D&D tried to write with some balance. So every class has to have some weakness. But some are a lot weaker than others, and clerics, let's be real, probably aren't the weak. Um, they have too many concentration spells.
I mean, they're not warlocks.
No, I mean, we'll do that episode, but they're gonna have to pay you money. So they have too many concentration spells, and like that doesn't sound like a bad thing, but when a bunch of your first through like fifth level spells that are cool and you want to use all require concentration, it becomes a choice of what do you think is going to be most effective fight. Someone held spirit guardians always need spirit. Do you need to be healing people a bonus action 2d6 around? You probably also need that. Do
That's good.
you get there's a lot of stuff. Do you want to bless your party? You know, so you have a lot of choices. What you're going to concentrate on as a caster, and I think clerics have probably some of the most concentration spells. I won't say that, quote me as that, but I'm pretty
They
sure
have
that
a lot.
a majority of their spells, besides like quick heals, are concentration. So you have to make very important and dramatic decisions that could affect certain outcomes or at least effects of a round of what you're concentrating.
Yeah. Yeah, and it may not seem like a weakness, but it can certainly, it can hurt those spell slots. The next thing is their action economy isn't great. Just they don't get a lot of reactions, while plenty of domains give reactions out. As like, if you're not of the right domain, you might not just have reactions. Um, without certain lineages or whatever. But like, your action is very precious, as well as your move. And again, they do get spiritual weapon, which is kind of a nice freebie bonus action. But as you get higher levels, you play this balancing game of what do I really want to do with my bonus. Um, so yeah, their action is very, very precious to them, and their economy is okay. It's kind of middle of the road. Not impressive, but not terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think this kind of is a thing that comes with most spellcasters, which your spell choice is very important. You have prepared for one kind of day, and then the adventure takes you into a different thing. You might not have the right spells prepared. So I think having a nice bank of like these spells will likely be useful all the time, with then like 3 or 4 spells you switch in and out to help will make sure that you can do most jobs. So that the weakness I would say is that if you're not prepared for the right kind of day, your spells could be literally ham sandwiches.
Yep. You just have a big bag of ham sandwiches. Um, yeah, I'm gonna kind of just roll off of that one. And sometimes the cleric list can. There's a lot of choices on there, and there's a lot of, well, what's the right tool for the job? What's the right spell to work within my party? And that choice paralysis can become real. of not knowing or feeling guilty that crap, I didn't take that spell that would definitely help the fighter right now. Shoot, Um so it's something to consider that prepared list of spells. Like I'll say this: there's days that I've gone into fights or I've gone into the adventuring day, and I'm like, I'm not taking the spell, and it might screw me, but I'm gonna hope for the best and hope I don't need it, but I don't have it right now. And then there were times where I didn't have the spell I needed. It did screw me, and my friend or my had to suffer through the status until the next morning when I could fix it. So it's a thing to consider. I guess just try not to get bogged down too much. And again, learn by playing. You'll see what your party needs as you play with your party.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, huge weakness. They generally suffer from poor dexes and shitty initiatives. The old saying of like, "Up, I rolled a cleric initiative." Um,
Yep.
you wear medium to heavy armor, so sneaking you're kind of terrible at, except with certain exceptions, which are the trickery domain.
Pretty much trickery. Like pretty
But
much trickery
yeah,
domain.
you're guess what, guys? You're not Dexy. Your charisma save and wisdom save. So all the other things are really what you rolled and your lineage that kind of affect what you can and can't do, how well you are. But you are again not a physical. You're not making those physical saves as well as others.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Yeah, I literally in the game that Gene runs that I play a cleric in, my dexterity's a 9, and I make no bones about it. I have a -1 dexterity. Whenever the party's like, "Hey guys, let's stealth ahead," I'm like, "I'm gonna fuck this up. Like, I am going to ruin this for you guys." Um, but it's hey, you can't be good at everything. The next thing is kind of their con save. So, because you have a lot of concentration spells, and generally you want those concentration spells to stick around to be as useful as possible, they don't get training in constitution saving throws. And con is kind of like a secondary or even a tertiary stat for you. So, you know, you might find, and I definitely found this a few times as my cleric, I would bomb out on my concentration checks. I would lose spells because that's just the nature of the beast. So without taking certain feats or having or specifically putting points into Constitution, you might find you're losing concentration quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for my cleric, I took it for my sorcerer. Any caster that doesn't get con as a save start, I
Yeah.
I always take it. I take feats to support that, either warcaster or resilient. Um, I really think I think Rennie definitely felt this, and it's part of the reason why I chose Death Domain for the kind of character I was building in Curse of Strahd, which is you get so little armor and weapon proficiency. Don't take the right domain. I mean, medium armor is good, but you really want chain and plate, probably. And being limited to simple weapons, not getting
Ugh.
any of those good
Ugh.
one-handeds or good two-handers can kind of really, not make you feel as cool when you do get your one attack around. You're like, oh, okay.
Yo, listen, if anyone from Wizards of the Coast ever watches this, and I don't care if they don't, but explain to me how a forge cleric who can literally make long swords all day, just clap his hands and long swords appear, but as soon as he picks one up to stab someone, he starts chewing on it. Like I just don't get how forge clerics don't get martial weapons when you can make them all day. Doesn't make any sense to me.
I see you took the salty domain.
Yeah,
Uh,
apparently I did. Um, keeping in my salty theme, sometimes you can feel a little salty if you have to sacrifice your action to heal others or to get them up off the ground or to use your restoration spell to take a status effect off them. And just because, and listen, it might be the right thing tactically to do, but it can be like, oh man, I had my turn set up to do this thing and it would have been cool. Like I had a cool thing planned, but now I can't because I got to save your dumbass. And again, that's not always the attitude, but there might be times where you feel like choice gets taken away from you because of circumstance. And again, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but it can leave you feeling a little bit like, oh, dude, if only my spell that I had planned to go off, oh, dude, it would have been great. But here I am. So I don't know if it's a super weakness, but I can tell you as a cleric player, sometimes you feel you get yourself pigeonholed into certain doing certain things at certain times. But again, no one's the boss of you. Do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again falls into the party dynamic. That if you don't want to play the heal cleric, well, then maybe people need to figure out other ways to get support. um, I think they're very active casters instead of being proactive or reactive. And so if you go up against and have counterspell, it can really hurt. Some sort of anti magic, which I think affects most casters. I mean, you don't really have a lot of spells that don't require voice since you kind of pray to the gods loudly.
Yeah.
I mean, and darkness, the spell can also magical darkness can really impede you because if you can't see where you're hitting, you can't cast spells at it. So things that hamper your spell casting really take out a big chunk of your arsenal since you are a primary caster. I think counterspell is the meanest thing. As when I play NPCs, I counterspell Rennie's heals all the time. Not
All the time.
not because I'm a jerk going after his cleric, but whenever I make a wizard or NPC who has counterspell, I just counterspell the first magical effect a PC casts because it could be an apocalypse spell that'll end everything. So you always have to counter it, or at least try to.
Don't let him lie to you. He just likes
No,
countering
I
violent
crit
spells.
against Rennie. I don't counter his spells.
You do.
I
You are
roll,
really gonna
I
crit
roll a
against
lot of
me.
crits against you.
And kind of last but not least, at least in our assumption, something that I have found playing some higher level clerics, some of those seventh, eighth, and ninth level spells require a long casting time outside of combat. And again, it's like a weird weakness because it's like, man, I get this amazing spell to do this amazing thing. I guess I'll take an hour to cast it. So, it's kind of one of those like, is it really a weakness? But um, I've definitely found that in certain options, if I'm a more combat oriented cleric and I want one of those instantaneous spells to drop on someone, there's some options are kind of limited at that higher end. Now, don't get me wrong, doesn't mean being able to cast Temple of the Gods on a place is a bad thing. It's pretty
Or be
cool.
like,
Same with Symbol.
you can't teleport in here ever.
Yeah.
We're done. We're
This is
done with
my
extra
house.
planar creatures. We're just done with that.
This Waffle House is protected from God.
I want to know what domain you chose to be the Waffle House protector. Death.
That's a nature domain.
It's death domain.
Death domain. I mean, I don't know, man.
Waffle House.
Have you ever been in a Waffle House at like 3 a.m.? Because that's the trickery domain.
Yeah, we have. It was incredible.
And it was delicious.
Oh my god, so many waffles.
But like someone had died or dealt meth within the last 20 minutes.
So before we move on to our last and final room, I know we've taken a lot of your time, and we thank you for saying.
We
Please
appreciate it.
feel free to start asking us questions, either about the cleric stuff, about D&D, or just weird questions, because we do the weird stuff. We do the weird
About
stuff.
Waffle Houses.
Yeah, if you want to know more about our adventure to Waffle House, driving a 9-hour trip in 7 hours. Yeah, we did the parsec. We did the Kessel Run in 2 parsecs. It was incredible.
That was such a wild day.
Anyway, no guy on guy dancing. Anyway, so Rennie, this is our last roll for initiative.
Our last one.
for at
I
least.
lost, so I'll start this bad boy. Oh, Thunder Jesus, be with me.
Don't you dare.
Oh, Thunder Jesus! Thunder Jesus is my new Lord and Savior.
All right, listen, Thunder Jesus. Me and you don't often have an understanding, but I understand it.
Wow, you just conceded defeat before you rolled. I want everyone here to
I
know.
I knew I wasn't gonna roll 20. I felt it in my bones, and so
Listen, you don't step to Thunder Jesus.
listen.
That's the
I got
rule.
my one. I got my one. Divine intervention at the first roll, so I'll take it. As I change this over to the room of
reflection,
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 reflection.
reflection. I always love the room of reflection.
Yeah, even though I call it the
Uh,
fountain of reflection because there's a fountain in the center, but whatever. That's not important.
a fountain can be in a room. I don't understand your fixation on this fucking fountain.
Because it reflects back. You look into it and you see yourself and reflection.
Why does if anything that supports my room theory less your fountain
Room's
theory.
covered in stone, and therefore it's not reflective, but the fountain is
All
covered in
right, I'm done talking to you about this.
good times.
Um, so in the room of reflection, clerics are awesome casters. They just have access to awesome spells, and they are awesome multi-class options because a lot of their abilities get front loaded very early. They generally get their domain stuff at level 1 and their specific channel divinity thing at level 2. So like even if you only take 2 levels of cleric, maybe 3 for whatever reason, like taking 2 levels of cleric just to get their channel divinity is not a terrible choice. Um, and there's plenty of wisdom based classes that the crossover isn't too wild. Making a monk cleric, I can totally see that. Um, a ranger cleric, which we have in one of Gene's Eberron games that he's running right now. Um, there is a lot of potential to in the great multi-class grab bag of class features that you're going for, there is some really nice combinations that exist, specifically like, you know, Battle Master and Tempest Cleric and Storm Sorcerer,
or Battle
you know,
Master War Cleric.
Battle Master War Cleric, or any kind of fight class and War Cleric. Um, so there is a lot of overlap out there that can really give you some nice class features for not a lot of levels, which is really nice when it comes to the great multi-classing kind of debate.
No, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I could see a lot of definitely a lot of wisdom classes, but like right now in one of Rennie's games, I'm doing a Warforged. Or not Warforged. I am a Warforged, but I'm playing an Artificer cleric, and it's
You
pretty
are all
cool.
those things.
And a Forge domain cleric, and it's nice having a whole lot of low level magic items just to kind of either give out or make yourself a little bit more tanky. So I get my ass kicked all the time.
What's up?
I mean, so for me, when I look at I don't I know clerics like I don't think there's huge amount of feat support in the sense of fighter feats and fighting feats, but I can definitely see
Yeah,
where. But it makes sense because fighters and rogues and people, they need some extra oomph, and that's where the feats come in. But definitely any warcaster or things that make you better at concentration are super good. Even some of those elemental adepts, especially if you're going, Tempest, be like, I bypass lightning resistance, and all ones count as twos. Woo!
I can even see a light cleric doing it for fire.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, so there's a few decent feat supports for it. I mean, I'll tell you as a death cleric having a little dip into uh magic initiate for some blade cantrips and a familiar, super nice.
Yep.
Um but yeah, I mean, yeah, I could definitely see a bunch of combo builds, but again, as a cleric, I generally don't go for too many feats. I generally go for stats just to kind of make my casting better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I kind of agree with you about the feat thing. A lot of times I feel like you're taking feats to help other areas, not necessarily support your cleric areas. But you know, I think the next thing too is that cleric is a phenomenal class. It just is. Being a pure cleric, you're not going to have a bad time. You know,
no
you're going
bad
to get more good
times.
spells. You're going to get, you're going to be able to turn greater undead or destroy greater undead. Like, you're never going to have a bad time if you went raw cleric to 20. Do a lot of games get to 20? Maybe not. But, with some classes, kind of being a purist is fine, but it might get a little boring or it might get a little stale. Cleric's not going to do that, at least in my opinion. Cleric's going to keep paying out. You're still going to be the greatest healer. You're still going to be everyone's best friend when you wake up and go, hey, aid, aid, death ward, death ward. And everyone's like, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Freedom of movement? Yes, please.
Oh
Like,
yeah, those
you're
preemptive buffs before going into a
right.
situation.
And that's the nice thing is they have a lot of these 8-hour buffs. Like aid is an 8-hour, death ward's an 8-hour, freedom of movement might only be an hour. I don't know. It even
Hero
might be an 8 hour.
Hero feast 24 hours.
Heroes Feast. Heroes Feast. It's amazing. So I feel Cleric is one of those classes because I mean, like, listen, I like to multi-class a lot, but there are certain literally in the game that we've been referencing, Gene's Eberron game. I'm a pure Forge Cleric, and I'm very happy with my
Yeah, and
choices.
I'm a 10th level grave cleric in this Curse of Strahd, so
Right, and
I
Gene's killing it,
yeah, and I
literally.
have no desire to multiclass. The only thing I would consider multiclassing is to paladin, but I am not because paladins.
I think that makes sense for Charles Henry.
Yeah, but paladins amazing. Anyway, um, so so I guess my takeaway from uh cleric would be, look at what you want to play. Do you want to play that zealot? Do you want to explore that person bringing faith to the world, either through your own action or through your words and deeds? How do you want to do it? Do you want to be like a traveling missionary where you solve minor problems in the name of your god, maybe even quietly? You're not seeking the glory, you're just doing the good work. Like, I chose my role play because I like the idea of being this kind of like humble farm village idiot who was just like, yep, I'm a normal guy, sweat on the brow. And then fucking something incredible happened. And he's like, well, I guess I gotta do it. And just like picks up a shovel and is like, one day I'll come back to digging graves in the most boring village I can think of. And that'll be a great day. But until then, I guess I'll be a hero for a little, you know? And so I think, yeah, having a faith role playing, having, even sometimes questioning your faith can be part of it. Like, I definitely had that, especially in Ravenloft being is, like, that can put doubt on a lot of things. And so
Yeah,
you
I
can,
feel like if you don't question your faith in Ravenloft, you're not doing it right.
yeah. And so, like, as a cleric, you have a lot of different avenues. And that can also be even being like, if you have faith in something that, you weren't raised with, and now you're a chosen of this. So it's like, it opens up so many different avenues depending on how you want to go. And so if you want to play someone who has that divine call or that faith-based and spiritual role play, cleric could be for you, especially if you want to do it, but you may not want to be like so paladin and like it is devotion that if you break it, all of your shit will be taken away. You know, I think cleric could be for you.
Yeah, yeah. I think Gene hit a lot of great points, and it's about exploring spiritualism in the game. And again, it's not about kind of bogging maybe your friends down with deep philosophical questions about the nature of life and death, but it's exploring it in in a safe way at a table where the stakes are a lot less high because you're imaginary. But again, it's still fun to have those conversations and to explore that mentality, especially if you are a person who is faithful in real life and has spiritualism. It can be interesting to kind of take that the perspective shift, right? And then again, if you're someone who's an atheist or someone who isn't very spiritual, to be like, let's see what this looks like, and again, play the game as you play the game, and don't decide the story before it's being told. But there's a lot of ways to explore spiritualism, and I think clerics, not only are they a fun class to play for the variety of reasons we just said, I think they give you a wonderful opportunity to add something to a story that is a very unique presence. And again, it's, all of us have questions about the nature of the world around us and what's after, what's before. And in D&D, while those questions are answered with big gods and magic, it's still fun to explore the implications of those things. So yeah, honestly, I love Cleric for a variety of reasons. For the roleplay reasons, um, being a support class, honestly, it is one of my favorite things in the world to be a support class and just be like, you, cool, you're buffed, heal, buff, heal. Like I love that stuff. Um, so it's a bit of play style choice, it's a bit of role play choice, but either way, I think again, like in many classes and in many role play choices, the more you put in, the more you get out. And yeah, clerics are pretty dope.
Absolutely. So, unfortunately, Rennie, I don't think we have a lot of
Gene,
audience.
we answered all the questions.
We
They
answered,
have faith.
yeah, we answered
They
every
found Thunder Jesus. That's what
Thunder
happened, Gene.
Jesus, answered every question for them.
Perfect. Well, honestly, that was one of our longer episodes.
Really
And
long.
for people who are still here, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna call it here. And I still refuse to do a show about warlocks.
Oh, it's gonna happen. Maybe that'll be something we do with our potion points. Is if you spend like we'll do
No,
like a campaign where if they pay like 20,000 potions collectively of all our followers and
that's not
subscribers,
cool.
we
That's not cool.
we will force Rennie into doing a warlock episode. He fucking yeah, we are gonna start developing some cool things to do with our channel points affecting both dungeon delvers, and I think Rennie and I are considering experimenting on. I'll do Rangers. I actually really like the new fucking Rangers. I will do Rangers.
I'm less salty about Rangers because, like, even though Rangers aren't great, I still feel like they can do stuff. I don't think they're as good at it as other classes, but Warlocks are just like the worst version of every other class.
That is also true. Uh,
Um. All right. Cool. Well, yeah, we're still developing stuff, and guys, again, thank you so much for spending your night with us. And I think we're gonna call it here. Yeah, Gene.
yeah, we're gonna call it here, and if you guys want to stick around, we'll raid one of our friends. We have both aspiring adventurers and players and creators are streaming. So if you want to stick in for a few minutes just to do a raid with us, thank you for watching. We appreciate y'all. Yeah, just give me one moment, and if you want to join us to raid players and creators for all their support, uh,
Let's rate them. Let's get them, Gene.
I'm gonna try. I'm not good at this. I don't understand how Twitch works.
Twitter, Gene. I feel like you're
All right. I think we're about to raid, so I'm gonna switch this over screen. Thank you all for watching.
with three raiders. I get it.
All right.